Welcome everyone to our fourth broadcast. I'm Madhu Vishwanathan. Once again, we are in a conference room at the Business Instructional Facility at the University of Illinois. For the coming 2 weeks, we will broadcast from Tanzania with the time and day of broadcast to be determined. This time we have some of our team members. We have Christina.
Hi.
We have Maria. We have Nan.
Hey.
We also have participants in the course who will be posing questions or raising issues. Before we go to the discussion part of today's session, a couple of thoughts. Where have we been and where are we going? We started out with a bottom-up approach to subsistence marketplaces, essentially the intersection of poverty and marketplaces. We illustrate the bottom-up approach through two modules, understanding subsistence marketplaces and designing solutions based on this understanding. We developed understanding of thinking, feeling, and coping, consumers and entrepreneurs, exchanges and relationships in marketplaces, needs, products, markets and relationships, local environments, and gaining insights in marketplaces. We used a variety of means: video lessons, readings, poverty simulation, day-in-the-life videos, ecology videos, a movie, a video of observation and conversation, and interview transcripts. Our project track started out with images and videos of local marketplaces, followed by observation, conversation, and interviews. We now move to using this understanding to design solutions. So we apply our learning to create goods and services offerings by understanding the need or problem, what drives that need or problem to be so stark, and elements of the larger context. We evaluate solutions, design the core and augmented offering, design an ecosystem around this offering, and develop elements of the enterprise plan. Could be business oriented, could be social enterprise oriented, could be a hybrid. We conclude with a summary of the course. We use many examples to illustrate these different aspects of designing solutions. The project moves through assessing need, drivers, and context elements, to interviews and observations, assessing solutions, assessing enterprise plans, and participating in a poster session. Once again, we use a variety of methods, and together we push the envelope in terms of this online medium. So we take some risks, but we truly believe that this is a medium where together we can apply our learning and move towards designing solutions. The second module is hands-on and applied, making it even more important to work through a hypothetical or real project by focusing on a need or a problem that you are really passionate about, that you care about. So let us move to questions from students. And so I welcome you to ask questions. So let's start with Luis.
Thank you. Right now, I just want to say that, for example, in my case, I live in a very poor country, but I have first I didn't understand this, and now after the interviews, I have learned a lot. Even I have seen poverty all my entire life here. But now I can understand more, and well, the interviews, they have been amazing, and also the movies. Right now, just basically, I don't have right now a good question, but maybe Barbara, she had one before.
Okay. Thank you, Luis. No, I just wanted to comment on what you said. You said something very interesting, which is that you've spent your entire life there, but nevertheless you learn a lot by talking to people. And that's something both I and my students can really relate to, no matter where we grow up. For example, I grew up in India, and I certainly saw people of low income. I interacted with them. I hope I was empathetic at that age growing up. And I had a lot of conversations, but it was really seeing them from a distance. It was the person who sells vegetables. It could have been the driver of an automobile, and so on. So it was from a distance, and it's totally different to sit down and study something, even if it's in your own culture. So we often talk about this, our students, depending on the culture they are from, and how growing up in a culture gets you just a very small percentage of understanding. It certainly gives you an understanding of the culture, but then when you move down in terms of socioeconomic status and you actually sit down and study it, it's a very different scenario. And this is true even if you grew up in poverty, or I believe if you grew up in a lower middle class. I think just studying something is different from seeing it around you. Sometimes when it's around us, we take things for granted, we take our understanding for granted. In fact, nowadays I tell my students who prepare and go into a new context that in many ways, they are really ideally suited for this because they don't have the baggage and they don't prematurely dismiss solutions. Whereas there are people in that context who say, oh no, this won't work or that won't work. So our students, when we go on international immersion, bring a very fresh perspective to this. So I really appreciate your comment. One last thing I'll add to that. One of the things I've noticed, is people will say, well, people who are, in these marketplaces who are poor, they know how to argue, they know how to bargain and so on. That's an interesting comment. I can understand the comment from a distance. But as we study, what we find is like everybody else, they have strengths and they have vulnerabilities. And sometimes arguing is a way of, negotiating the marketplace for them. If they can talk, then it's a way to, confront a lot of different situations. But beneath that argument, you will find that there are lots of vulnerabilities as well in terms of not understanding some basic things. But at the same time, there are strengths as well, which is no different from any of us. We all have our strengths and vulnerabilities. If you put me in a different context, I'm probably going to have more vulnerabilities than strengths. So it's really that combination that we see. So let me go to Barbara.
Oh, no, just asking regarding the project milestone. I think it's a very important thing to do now at this moment of the project, of the course. But I was thinking that living in a big city like Rome, the kind of poverty I could try to study is not consistent with the themes we are going depth in the course, and so I was just trying to imagine what I could do, just not to miss the opportunity to try to do this research. So the only idea I had was to try to pool with other students that are in the condition to make at least some interview, and maybe try to help analyze the result together, try to simulate what happens when we make project in the field. Otherwise, maybe it's I have no idea how to find out a way to do this.
No, I really appreciate what you're saying, Barbara. I know I've said that, even if you work this out hypothetically, using the context we have presented for you, it'll be useful, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as having a single conversation. So I really see what you're saying. And as you were talking, I was wondering if there's an intermediate approach where you could work with some other group members in different countries. For example, Luis is right now in a marketplace. I believe at an internet kiosk, but is there a way you could work with others where you could virtually interact with a subsistence consumer or entrepreneur? So you are looking into the interview, you're able to ask questions and so on. That is something we do quite a bit with our education as well. In fact, there is an executive program we run. The first thing, or almost the first thing that our managers in that program do is talk to people living in subsistence across the world directly through Skype. We usually use something like Skype for video, and then we use a phone line for the audio, or some combination like that. That is impactful. It's not the same as being there, but it is certainly a step up from looking at the videos we have in front of you, because you're actually interacting with the person. That's the first thing they do, and then a couple of weeks later, they again interact with the same people to further understand their needs, and then they again interact with the same people to show them some solutions. So if there is a way to do this virtually where you could connect to others who are closer to subsistence marketplaces, that may be a way to go as well. And I really like your approach of saying, no matter what, let's try to move through the project milestones. And I know that some of you may be a week or two behind. It really doesn't matter. Those markers that we have are really just some kind of structure, but what is much more important is that you try this out and you go through the course in some form in terms of the project as well. So I really appreciate your comment. Thank you very much for that. I believe, is it Carola? Excuse me, I apologize for saying your name wrong. Carola, could you introduce yourself and let us know of any issue or question you have?
My question is about the project. I started a little late with the project because I had a lot of doubts, and I wrote those doubts on the forum. And I think that the forum was a great moment to share doubts with others. There was a friend of mine who told me, well, just do it. And you said that too on the last online view. So I started. I know I didn't do a great interview. I just had a conversation, but it was my first approach, and I'm now thinking about solutions, or starting to think about solutions. I think that talking with others may bring me better ideas. So I'm just eager to the next part of this course to see how to deal with solutions. It's not a question, it's just to encourage others to just start the project. It's like that, and then you think that there are many other projects you might have started. Okay, I'm from Argentina. I live in Buenos Aires, which is the city of Argentina. And well, my project is based on the rural area in the south of Argentina, in a small village. I have just visited that village, and I wanted to know more about it, because it's a rather isolated village, and the people has to deal with cold temperatures, and well, I just wonder what was the rest of the year of those people. So that's my project.
Okay, so let me respond, Carola. That we were in Mendoza a few months ago, and we also are trying to create a deep engagement in communities there. We are just at the starting stages, and we are also looking at a couple of places very similar to where you are looking to work at. I also really appreciate your comment to the other students about trying to get a project going. And again, by that, I don't mean making a long-term commitment, but just having a conversation and acting as if something is a project. And obviously, you know, we want to make sure and be clear about the promises we make to communities. So sometimes it's good to, you know, make smaller promises and say, this is what we'd like to do, this is where I am, and leave things open. I think that's so important as well in terms of some of these commitments that we make. The notion of having a conversation takes you out of your comfort zone. It puts you in a different setting, and it basically, you know, makes you learn a lot of different things, and then, you know, it just stimulates a lot of thinking. So just to give you an example, we are actually involved in a course that all of our students receive on professional responsibility. But unless they go to their comfort zones and see how people very different from them live, what are they being professionally responsible about? We are limited by what we know, right? We are limited by what we're exposed to. And the more we are willing to see and talk to people who are absolutely different from us in the way they live, the more we get exposure. And so I really appreciate what you're trying to do. These kinds of settings always pull you back, because for no apparent gain, you see the affection of the people. They really appreciate the fact that you've gone to visit them. They appreciate the fact that you've taken the time and so on. So I really appreciate your comment about this particular issue. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Any other questions?
I was guessing how, as I noticed, it takes a lot of time to get the insight in the field. When you design the field research, how long you have to dedicate for how long is a mission to collect insights in a area you want to study, and how many you plan, just to get an idea how we have to design a project in the future?
Thank you again. Again, a very challenging question. And I would say it obviously depends on the type of issue you're looking at. But I would think of it this way. The immersion in the field part should just be ongoing, even after you've started thinking about a solution and so on. It's just an ongoing piece. It keeps us honest. It sheds light on what we do. We want that continuous engagement. I can think of our own example where we really like the continuous kind of engagement because we keep getting feedback on what we are doing, and that helps us to improve and so on. Certainly in the beginning, it's very important to see how people live, how they work. It's very important to sit down and talk to a variety of different stakeholders about some of the issues there and so on. I also think in the early stages, if people in the community are part of your team or become part of your team, who are then semi-dedicated or dedicated to your project, that helps a lot because they can take you up the information curve as well quite quickly. So I would say certainly, this is the kind of thing where you're talking weeks, you're talking months, sometimes you're talking listening for a year as well. So it really depends, but it doesn't have to be this discrete stage. It's something that continues on, it's ongoing, and you may be able to get a sense of an issue and say, let me go down this road. Let me try out this one small thing without making a long-term promise. And that's another very good way to learn as well, learning by doing. And you could try out something and say, this is all I'm doing. I'm here to try this out as a pilot because I think I have some understanding in the weeks or months I've been here. So let me play this out. And I think doing is a very good way of learning, because then one of the things that happen is you realize that 10 or 20 steps, 20 times the steps that we thought it would be when we started out. So you realize that, wow, to put this together, these are the different things it takes. This is what happens when you actually do this. Let's say it's an educational program. This is what it takes to actually put the educational program together. Wow, I didn't realize that I did not incentivize every piece of the educational program. And as a result, the people didn't show up or people didn't do this or that. And so I think I'm a very big fan of, first of all, having people in the local community who are semi-dedicated or dedicated to the project. They just add an amazing dimension. They provide the bottom-up understanding. They provide the linkages with the community. And if they are people of credibility who truly care about the community, that is wonderful, because then they engender trust and so on. But I think it's also important to make them, to think about them as being dedicated or semi-dedicated. If it's a one-shot thing, it's very difficult for somebody to change their lives so that they can do something for us. So even if you make a promise for 3 months or 6 months and get that kind of semi-dedication to your project, I think that helps a lot. So that certainly is very important. The second thing is trying something out, fully communicating, articulating that it's a pilot. I think that has a lot of value. It forces us to put together what is it that we actually had in mind, and then to play it out, and then to realize that, what, I thought this was 5 steps, and now I realize it's 30 steps. Now all implementation, is like that. We start out thinking it's 5 steps, and then it ends up being 10, 15 steps. In the subsistence context, you can multiply that even more. So it ends up being a lot more steps, from the very basic things like, if it's an educational program, where do I get the chairs for people to sit? Where's my place going to be? Am I going to have, the proper conditions? What do I do for basic stationery and things like that, or for technology? So I really think that, trying out something and then having people who are local be part of the team are 2 important components.
So it's like, let me see if I understand. It's like more you monitor an area, and maybe there's several different people coming back with insights, and then you keep on collecting and trying to you focus maybe on a group of people on an area and see what are the trend in their subsistence and what they can do, but not much that you go make some research and then come back. And I mean, it needs a very long term approach. Is it right?
I think in a sense the word project can sometimes be misleading because that sounds very discrete. What you're trying to do is, in order to have some impact, you need to be in the community for the longer term. But at the same time, we have to break up our promises, because we are not sure that we can do what we promised to do a year from now. So that's where it's important to break up our promises, I think, in terms of, here's what I'm here for. And this is what I plan to do for the first 3 months. This is the kind of promise I can make to you. But at the end of 3 months, if I don't proceed, I don't want you to feel that somehow I've misled you. I think that's very important for communities like this. I also think that beyond the typical surveys, it is so important to sit down and talk to people. I think we gain a lot by these deep conversations where we talk to people as well. So that's another aspect to it. Rather than just conducting surveys that are more of a quantitative type. I mean, those are important. Hopefully there's some data that's already out there that helps you. But the kinds of conversations we need to have are the deep conversations where we truly try to understand these different life circumstances. So that's
the conversation
piece as well.
The conversation is carried out by people who belongs to the community, I think, both for the language and for the trust issue. Is it?
Yes, but you are part of the conversation. So they may translate for you, they may participate, but you are part of the conversation. The other thing I want to mention is that there are a number of different types of organizations that you could work with who would provide the access. There are the larger NGOs, but there are also the community-based organizations. Sometimes they have a lot more access. It may be women's groups in that area who meet regularly at a location. They are closer to the community than the larger NGOs in some sense. And so, working with those communities or, working with those kinds of community-based organizations is another approach as well. And again, being very clear on what you're in it for and for how long and how you break up the promises, that's very important as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
My question is about cultural differences. We talked about on the forum because when we saw the videos from India, I found that there were some differences when talking about poverty in my own culture. Someone explained me that people may be laughing or smiling and at the same time suffering, and that was something that I didn't understand at first sight. So I think that we are learning about culture and the differences, and maybe we have to deal with those differences, and that's something else I think that we are learning.
In the early days of doing this work, one word came to mind when I saw the people, when I met the people, and how resilient they were and how cheerful they were and affectionate as well, which is it's not a very precise word to describe it, but the word was carefree. And I mean carefree in its best sense, which is they didn't know where their next meal is going to come from. But at the same time, there was a freedom about them in terms of how they were going about, they were not necessarily thinking about things in terms of who I am and what's going to happen to me in the longer term and, and so on, which is something that, I'm used to thinking. That continuity is something that I've taken for granted. That's the way my life has been and so on. And so I'm very comfortable thinking in the longer term. I'm very comfortable thinking about, whether it's retirement or a lot of other things, because I can take a lot of these things for granted. Whereas on the other hand, here were people who didn't know where their next meal is going to come from, but the way they interacted, the way they invite us into their homes and so on, it's really amazing to see. And sadly, there are people and this has happened, who I will not see again on the next trip. And it's a sad thing to say. It may be because of an illness or something like that. That's the level of uncertainty. That's how fickle life can be. But in spite of that, it's very interesting to see how inviting the people are, how affectionate they are. And this is something I've seen across the world, really in different continents. And that is something amazing to watch. And there is a resilience there that we can certainly learn from. And I hope as we learn from it, we also find a way to give back and have a positive impact. So, no, that's a very interesting comment. Luis, you had a question.
Yeah, what about the financial education? Because some of these, the people who live in subsistence marketplaces, maybe some of them, they can read well, okay, and write. They have good leadership, but they don't have these financial education, so sometimes they are like the system. and they have through the years they have more kids, and so that subsistence marketplace is not enough to fit their needs, and maybe they need to expand to another or open another store or something like that, but they can't. They don't have that financial education, or to get a loan, for example, they don't know about these interest rates. What do you think about that? About the financial education, and for example, in Philippines, at least the government, they give them choices of creating cooperatives, and they don't pay taxes for the first 4 years.
The way I view the world, oversimplified, of course, is in order for somebody who's poor to participate in the marketplace, they need financial resources, whether it's this kind of community level activity or microloans and so on. They need the financial resources. They need access to buy and sell. And by access, I mean more than just geographically being able to go to a marketplace. I also mean access as in to get the money for the value they've created, rather than somebody else kind of squeezing them out. And then the third piece is, of course, what I call marketplace literacy, which is the skills and awareness of rights and self-confidence and so on. So these are the three pieces. Your point is very well taken. In a sense, our work here, and you met Srini last week, he's involved in work of this sort as well, where basically we're looking at people who are just surviving. They're on the sidewalks. So it's almost like just survival. I mean, the barest of survival. We look at people who are subsisting, making ends meet, and that's a broad range. I mean, you could be of low income, you could be at the higher end of low income, but you're one hospital visit away from not making ends meet. So we really use the term for a broad range of low income. And then in some cases, they're subsisting, but somehow they're able to sustain and have some continuity. And then the next step is what we call more transformative subsistence entrepreneurs, who have a pathway, who are envisioning a pathway where they can move out from the low income range to perhaps lower middle class and above. We see people like that, and we see them in terms of both what they do for their own financial well-being, but also what they do for the community around them by employing them and so on. So I think your point is very well taken. Any kind of barriers that they could overcome in order to make that happen would be very important. And one of the most important barriers are financial resources. We also see that in our work, where when we ask people their obstacles, it may be that they don't know a particular livelihood to pursue, or don't know whether that livelihood has a market. But the other piece to it is just having financial resources. It's the people who are at the bottom who also have to adapt the most. They are the most vulnerable. They may start an enterprise, but somebody with 10 times the capital may come in and essentially, lower prices and drive them out of business. And that's part of, competition. And so they are precisely the ones who have to adapt and who have to find a way to grow, to diversify perhaps, do different things. And they do it in their own way. They may be delivering milk, they may be running a store. So they do it in their own way. And one of the things they need to move up is the kind of the financial ecosystem as well. So I don't have a specific answer. There are lots of different answers to this, and sometimes it's a very big obstacle which keeps people behind. But certainly when people can envision beyond the immediate, and they can envision moving into being transformative and growing their business, it would be wonderful if there are more opportunities for them to have this kind of financial support as well, where they already have a kind of a pathway where they've already shown that they can grow and they can improve their community as well through employment and so on. So those are types of entrepreneurs who are in the subsistence communities, by the way. I'm not talking about people from outside. I'm talking about people in the communities who have this potential. And we have seen that again and again. People have this potential, and for them to grow, and have the financial ecosystem would be very important, I think. And that's something I think NGOs, governments, and so on need to recognize, that there are people in the community with this potential to both bring their community up and also bring themselves up and move beyond subsistence. Any other questions? Let's say goodbye for now. The next two broadcasts will be from Tanzania. We're not sure if they'll be live or not because of some of the issues with connectivity and so on, but we will certainly be in touch, and we thank you for taking the time, and we will see you online, and we'll see you in our broadcast as well. Thank you.